The Rust Haven orbital station hadn't seen a living soul in 47 years when Orion Vance purchased it for the price of scrap metal. The transaction took 11 minutes through a disinterested broker, who seemed surprised anyone wanted the decaying husk floating in the outer fringe. Orion didn't explain himself. He simply transferred the credits, received the access codes, and piloted his battered shuttle toward what he decided would be his tomb. At 63, Orion Vance had outlived his usefulness. The galaxy had moved beyond mechanics who understood machines through touch and intuition. Modern vessels repaired themselves with nanoswarms and AI diagnostics. His calloused hands, once capable of coaxing life from dying engines across 100 worlds, now trembled with the early stages of Corridor's disease. A spacer's affliction with no cure, only a slow fade into paralysis and madness. He had 6 months, maybe 8 if he was unlucky. The station's airlock groaned like an ancient beast as it cycled. Orion stepped into darkness punctuated only by emergency strips that flickered with dying conviction. The air tasted of rust and abandonment. Perfect. He'd spend his remaining time alone, surrounded by the honest decay of metal and circuits, away from the pitying eyes of a universe that had forgotten men like him. For 3 weeks, Orion established his routine. He powered up life support in a small section, rationed his supplies, and spent his days walking the silent corridors. His hands still worked well enough to tinker with the station's ancient systems, not to repair them, but to understand them, to commune with technology from an era when machines were built to be comprehended, rather than merely used. It was during one of these walks, through a section he'd labeled Cathedral, a vast chamber where the station's original solar collectors had been housed, that he found her. She lay crumpled beneath a shattered observation dome, crystalline fragments scattered around her like fallen stars. At first, Orion thought she was a hallucination, the disease playing tricks on his mind. But when he knelt beside her, his engineer's instincts overrode his resignation. His hands moved across her form, assessing damage with the same systematic approach he'd once used on dying ships. She wasn't human. That much was immediately clear. Her skin bore an iridescent sheen that shifted between azure and silver. Delicate scales traced elegant patterns along her arms and neck. Most striking were the translucent membranes folded against her back, wings, he realized, torn and bleeding a luminescent fluid that pooled beneath her. Her face, though alien, held a terrible beauty that made Orion's dying heart stutter in his chest. A dragon girl. He'd heard spacer tales of the Drakari, a nearly extinct species from the galactic core, but never imagined encountering one. Especially not here in the ass end of nowhere. On a station that wasn't even supposed to be inhabitable, she was dying faster than he was. Something in Orion Vance's chest, the part that had already resigned itself to oblivion, suddenly rebelled. His hand stopped trembling. The fog that had been settling over his thoughts cleared. He'd spent 3 weeks preparing to die, but his body remembered what it meant to have purpose. Not today, he muttered, gathering her surprisingly light form into his arms. Not on my watch. The next 72 hours became a blur of improvisation that would have impressed his younger self. Orion converted his small habitation section into a medical bay, using every piece of equipment he could salvage. The Drakari physiology was completely alien, but machines were machines, and bodies were just organic machinery. He rigged a circulation pump from the station's old coolant system to stabilize her blood pressure, fashioned a breathing apparatus from oxygen regulators, used UV panels meant for hydroponics to stimulate cellular regeneration in her wings, a guess based on observing how her scales responded to light. His hands didn't shake once. On the 4th day, her eyes opened, vertical slits of molten gold that fixed on him with an intelligence that made him feel suddenly, intensely seen. "You are dying," she said, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. Not a question. A statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who could perceive such things. "Yeah, well," Orion replied, adjusting the IV he'd improvised from hydraulic tubing. "Get in line. Why save me then?" "A man waiting for death does not labor to preserve life." Orion paused, considering. Why had he? The honest answer surprised him. "Because you weren't ready yet. Neither of us gets to decide when someone else's time is up." Over the following weeks, Lysera healed, and as she healed, she talked. She told him of the Drakari, a species of explorers and artists who'd once soared between stars on solar winds, powered by organs that converted stellar radiation into thrust. She spoke of her people's extinction, not through war but through exhaustion, a species that had grown too tired to continue. She'd been fleeing the last of her kind, unable to watch them simply stop. "We lost our reason," she said one evening, her wings now partially restored and shimmering in the dim light. "Forgot why we ever reached for the stars. You humans, you're different. You're stubborn, brilliantly, foolishly stubborn." Orion laughed, a sound that felt foreign in his chest. "We're too stupid to know when to quit." "No." Her golden eyes held his. "You're too hopeful to accept defeat. Even when you think you've given up, something in you keeps building, fixing, saving." It was then Orion realized his hands hadn't trembled in weeks. The fog in his mind had receded. He checked his diagnostics and found the impossible. His corridor's disease had stabilized. Not cured, but dormant, as if his body had simply decided it wasn't finished yet. "You did this," he accused softly, "somehow." Lysera's scales rippled with color he was learning to interpret as amusement. "I did nothing. Your own biology responded to purpose. Humans are unique that way. You quite literally cannot be killed while you have a reason to live. That's not scientifically possible. Your species has made a career of accomplishing the scientifically impossible. Why should your own survival be any different?" 6 months after finding Lysera, Orion stood in the cathedral as she prepared to depart. Her wings had fully healed, magnificent structures that caught and refracted the light from the distant stars. She would return to the core, she said, to see if any of her people remained who could be reminded what it meant to reach for something beyond mere existence. "Come with me," she offered. Orion shook his head. "Got work here. This old station's starting to talk to me. Thinks it might want to live again. Might make a good way station for travelers. Never know who else might show up needing a place to remember why they're alive." Lysera approached him, her hand, scaled and alien yet somehow familiar, resting against his chest. "Your soul stirred, Orion Vance. Not because of me, but because that's what human souls do. They stir when needed most." After she left, trailing luminescence through the void, Orion returned to his work. His hands were steady. His purpose was clear. He'd bought this station to die on, but discovered something his stubborn species had always known. A human doesn't truly live until they find something worth living for. And once found, death itself has to wait its turn. The galaxy would learn this lesson again and again. Humanity, fuck yeah, indeed.